Thank you for staying with us. It's still Plus TV Africa, and we are live in our election studios. Now, in Kano State yesterday, a federal high court nullified the primaries that produced the People's Democratic Party's gubernatorial candidate, Mr. Yusuf. It says 3 days to the elections, literally the gubernatorial elections. What happens now? To look at this developing story with us, we have in the studio Mr. Reginald Bassi. He's a public affairs analyst. It's good to have you join us, Mr. Bassi.
Thank you so much.
And of course, we have Tony Folorenshaw. He is a public affairs commentator. It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you so
gentlemen,
much.
before we just kick into that conversation, we've been told that, well, we have to re-navigate before we get into that conversation. And now look at the president choosing the right cabinet. Now, looking at what played out when the president assumed office in 2015, some said there was a long delay in forming the cabinet. The president has said, well, that sort of mistake isn't going to repeat itself. Some people have also claimed that, well, looking at the appointments as well, they've been lopsided. The president said that's not necessarily the case, and the vice president, as said last year, gave the explanation that, well, it's because of the support that the president got from the northern part of the country. That's why he had those appointments. But this time around, what level of playing field do you expect the president to bring to the fore when it comes to appointment and how effective they start running? Reginald.
Right. I think the president has some level of experience now in terms of how to approach things differently from what happened in 2015. In 2015, he was basically a greenhorn. He was campaign weary. After having campaigned for probably 4 election cycles, people were pretty disappointed because they felt like you're a veteran in campaign, so you should hit the ground running. So I think now it's better because, of course, we've been hearing a couple of reports that some names have been going round and round, the president is ready to go. But it will be a serious mistake if he doesn't hit the ground running May 29th, as soon as he's sworn in, to name his cabinet and fly from there. And we expect that to happen. He's had tried and tested public officials who have served him. There are a couple of great names of persons that the president has worked with over the past 4 years. So we expect him not to slack on that aspect and just to hit the ground running, name his cabinet and get things moving.
Well, the president said something really interesting recently about the fact that he's interested in those who have integrity and the interest of Nigeria at heart. And this is very similar to what he said in 2015.
And that took 6 months to find that.
And it took 6 months, people made fun of it, saying, oh, he was looking for people who were going to come from heaven. And really, when we look at the crop of people who have worked in this administration, there might be a few who have worked with him, but then really, what makes this statement of Mr. President different from what he said, and why should we in any way believe that these next set of people will be people who have the interest of Nigeria at heart?
Some will say talk is cheap.
Yes, of course.
All right, for me, I believe government is about will and passion. In this current administration, we still believe that there are some ministers, they were overburdened. Like, take for instance, a simple analogy. Let's say I have a generator which I like the most. Then I make sure that I put AC on that same generator, put iron, put refrigerator, all because the fact that I love that generator. So it reduces the effectiveness, their productivity. So the likes of BRF, Babatunde Raji Fashola, should be relieved some portfolio. I mean, if Fashola can face that power, then we get it to a point that at least probably 12 to 14 hours a day, we can still have stable electricity. I believe that would be a very good achievement for this administration, not by combining housing with works and then with the power. That's for that. And of course, we have some ministers in this first regime that in one way or the other, they've committed some atrocity. We all know those people we're talking about. We have some people that they have some scandals, the issue of certificates and all. So for the president that talks about integrity and corruption-free society, these people are not supposed to be around him. So in this, from May, I expect the president to assemble his team right from now, even though we have case in courts.
Well, we've had feelings that the president has dissolved his cabinet and is already re-strategizing, but talking about dissolving that cabinet means that he has to reshuffle now, and understanding the antecedents where these state actors are coming from, how well they perform. What how does the president this time around now define the scope of integrity and effectiveness and capability to deliver? Because this is not just the first 4 years. This is the second 4 years, and he's saying that it's consolidating, so we cannot afford to make the same mistakes as the past.
Yeah, David, before David goes, the president is also holding a ministry, which people have also criticized. So when we're talking effectiveness here, we need to take that into consideration.
But in fact, listen, a man who would be able to, it's also a case of the English proverb, show me your friends, and I'll tell who you are. Who are the president's friends, really? How do we trust his judgment to find the right set of persons? Is there antecedent with him bringing the right set of people or competent people around him over time? Have we known him to be such a person? Not really. He's always been a dependent person when it comes to judgments, making judgments on other persons or who would work with him, because traditionally he's not been in the public policy sphere. He's just been a military general. So much of his portfolio has been his former role as a military head.
But some would say you should understand that this is a democracy, and since you decided to vie for that position,
understanding that and having the capacity to make decisions within that sphere it's a totally different thing. The president has basically been propped and supported over much of his political life. Now the APC has formed a system around him, and I don't think that's going to be very different this time around. It's going to be simply a party that is making the decisions for who becomes the ministers or who forms the cabinet, and I think that's what's going to happen. So we're still going to find within this cabinet people who may be, of course,
where lies the Constitution? Because as at October 2018, Senator Victor Ume, under the platform of Anambra Central, our plenary entitled the urgent need to appoint a representatives of the Southeast in the National Defense Council and National Security Council, noted that Section 218, subsection 2 of the Constitution empowered the president, yes, to make the appointment of service chiefs and security chiefs, but Section 217, subsection 3, stipulates the composition of the armed forces, and Section 14 is very clear that we must have individuals from across the country. If you are saying he's supposed to have learned from the past, this time around, would you still be surprised if we don't necessarily see the composition coming from across the country? Yes, we know that he's already made some recent appointment of 30 individuals to chair and commission the Revenue, Mobilization and Fiscal Commission. We know that's also a relevant place, and he's played fair in the distribution of that appointment. But within the security space, do you think we'll still see?
I don't think we'll see anything different. Listen, the president has a military background. He has a security background. So what usually happens in people in that sphere is people know people and usually would go with who is recommended and who they can trust.
Do those people have to be from a certain tribe or region of the country?
The Southeast has said, why aren't...
Exactly.
If you also look at the demographics of people who are in the security institutions in the country, you'll find that it's overwhelmingly people from the north, or people from certain regions of the country. So when it's time to make a decision or make a choice of where to get from, you are basically hampered, because you will have to go, sort of go through the eye of the needle to find persons, although people will make the argument that that's not true. But honestly, also, you would not want to appoint a person to a very sensitive position who you really do not know, or do not know their background, or don't know what they believe in.
But these things are supposed to be based on recommendation. I don't have to know you. Exactly. For the likes of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, they were recommended. These are people who their pedigree or their antecedents, preceded them.
But don't forget, we're talking about security.
I'm talking, of course, even security chiefs. Okay, let's take, for example, the military administration. We had impeccable military administrators. Take, for example, Marwa of Lagos State. We had the Abbes of River State. They were great military administrators. It wasn't so difficult to pick these people because they were recommended. Why, when it comes to picking service chiefs, we start saying, oh, well, you see, we don't have those. I mean, I'm sure that we have these people doing great jobs, but because if somebody tells to me that, oh, maybe some of them are not high enough to be taken to those positions, then I can sit back. But if we say we don't have enough of them, I have a problem with that.
But don't forget that, I mean, look, the military as an apparatus, it goes by ranks. Understand? You will always have to, I mean, the president is a former general. And that thing it's driven into them that you must respect rank. So if you're going to take someone from a lower cadre to a point, then you probably have to retire every other person above them. So I'm not making excuses for the president, but those are some of the challenges that they face. However, as a former military general, I mean, when appointing service chiefs, you would likely go with people who share the same ideology. And if those are people who are predominantly from one part, that's what will happen. Except there is solid advice given to him within the party or within his advisors. But outside of that, I don't see anything happening different with this current president. He's already shown the trend in terms of how he thinks and how he makes his appointments in that regard. And I think that it's not going to be anything different.
And some others too would still say that we are picking from a bad stock. Even looking at the likes of Minister of Agriculture, some would say, well, he's doing a good job, but we've not had agriculture still being the mainstream. We've not had enough of bills and enforcement and a whole lot more to support the agricultural sector. We look at the Ministry of Health as well. We have a doctor who is heading that team, but we've not seen an increase we've not seen an increase in the budgetary allocation for the health sector. So we are just still running around in circles. If we say these are the most competent hands that we have, we are heading this team, and we are not having results.
I think the problem has to do with the political parties we have. The parties, they have their blueprint. So the president too. Now, you make mention about the Minister of the Health, who is a professor from Premier University of Ibadan. Coming into government for the first time, the exposure, the experience the professor is bringing to the government is quite different. Now, President Buhari, as a retired military general of the then 1985 and the likes, it's a different ball game compared to now. We have some power that be, the cabals, that they will recommend. You and I know the competence men and women we have in this country. We all know those people that can actually drive this country to its potentials. We all know those people that can do this thing properly. But how can they? I'm driving us somewhere. How can these people get there? It further brings a question. Now, take for instance, a case study. We have a minister in this government who served, probably that should be second or third republic. And that same man is still a minister. Now, we are talking about a 21st century approach into all that we do now. Not only in Nigeria, but other parts of the world.
Well, the question still remains that he appointed these individuals to advise him. And if you're talking about budgetary allocation, who is supposed to advise the president? The Minister of Health, the Minister of Agriculture. These are individuals that should say, with this budget, we should have X, Y, Z. But we've seen declining numbers.
Well, nothing has really been done. So, I mean, why should we...
Look at the Ministry of Education, for example, in Lagos State. In the last 3 years, we haven't had any new schools built.
Schools are on strike. So, again, why don't the parties, the political parties, before we move on, have so much powers on the decisions of the president? Somebody was just saying that, look, for example, Donald Trump knows what he's going to do, and he's going to do it, whether it's what the Republicans stand for or not. He only used that platform to become president. Look at, I mean, Obasanjo, lots of people might not agree, was a great president, but he had very interesting technocrats, and he did not take them because that's what the party wanted. Let's look at Donald Duke. When he was working as the governor of Cross River State, he had people that were non-indigens in his government based on professionalism. Why can't we have that come to bear under a Buhari administration?
So, we cannot take away the fact that we have something we call party supremacy in African politics. We tend to compare with the same climb with the way we run our things here. In same climb, it's either you are the left or you are the right. We have two extremes. If you're a Democrat, you are a Democrat. If you're a Republican, you are a Republican. There's ideologies there. Here in Nigeria, we have what we call party supremacy. Even if you have your own idea, you have some personal conviction within yourself, there are some things you cannot go outside the party blueprint.
Look, I'm one of those who believes that, look, we hope that we come to a point where we would eventually have a visionary to lead this country, someone whose personality matches the office and can take leadership. We saw that a bit of that in President Obasanjo, that he did take leadership in terms of who became, his cabinet, the people who formed this cabinet. But that's not present right now. The president is pretty docile on those kinds of things, and he requires a lot of advice and help. So once you have a cabal that forms around him, they will take most of those decisions on his behalf. Because how many persons does the president really know the profile of Nigerians, expert Nigerians who are outside this country, within this country, who are doing great things? To the second point, I'm one of those who, look, you don't have to be a doctor to become the minister of, because usually people who, if you are in that field and you come in there, you have entrenched interests. So the challenge is that the way you look at things from within the system and not out of the system. I'm one of those who advocates for bring a different person to trouble the system and to disrupt the system, because they'll look at it holistically, they look at it in the different functioning parts and know how to attack the problem. If you take a teacher and make a minister of education, they will look at it from the entrenched position, because they are part of the problem. They've been dealing with the problem all these years. And so the challenge is that they are going to be very short-sighted in many things. May not be true in all cases, but I found that to be true in many of the instances. See all the professors that you've appointed, for instance, INEC, why must it be a professor of political science?
Yes.
We need a logistics professional, because that's much of the work that INEC does. So the president needs to be disruptive and radical in his approach to choosing a cabinet. Find the people who can deliver value, people who are visionaries, people who look at the problem holistically and can recommend to the president, look, we need to change our approach. These are ways we can fund the ministry if the National Assembly is frustrating the budget. These are ways we can go around it. But people who are visionaries at heart and who want to solve problems. Okay,
I'm sorry, David. The wife of the president, sometime early this year, if not last year, while he was sick, came up with the idea of a cabal. She kept screaming about the fact that they were not letting her husband do what he ought to do. And I remember Shehu Sani making fun of it and calling the crocodiles and the tigers and the jackals. So if we do have a cabal, is there any need for us to even preempt Mr. President if we know that there is a cabal, and then maybe it's the same thing we're going to see, really?
Well, for me, we still cannot take away the fact that all this cabal actually made the president who he is. Let's take it from 2003 to 2007 to 11 up to 2015, when he eventually won that election.
So you're saying, in some way to paraphrase, they appointed the president and they are supposed to play to their tune?
No, not completely and entirely true. Mr. President contested in 2003. We all saw the result. The same thing in 2007, we all saw the result. Up till 2015. Of course, politics is about interest. It's about interest. See, what will unite us in the game of politics is about our interest. If I'm having a clash of interest with him here right now, we're not going to go anywhere. For instance now, you are from party A, she's from party B. At some point, we disagree to agree. The moment our goal is to see how we are going to get access to that door, then we form a coalition. So now, like I told you, we all saw the results, right? From 2000, we have like 10 states which the president has never lost in his entire career. Are you getting it? And of course, in 2015, we also what happened in the Southwest. So this thing is logical. As much as I believe that government is not a rocket science, we cannot take away the fact that African politics still revolve around the cabal, the power that is.
Okay. Well, we have a video, David, of it's more like an opinion poll. We're trying to test the people to find out what they feel about Mr. President appointing new members into his cabinet, and this is what the people had to say.
Less than 2 weeks after President Muhammadu Buhari's victory at the presidential elections, his special advisor on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, has indicated that the president will likely be dissolving his cabinet before his May 29 swearing in for a second term. This decision has triggered mixed feelings amongst Nigerians.
Quite indifferent, and I'm not really following politics right now, but if he's going to do that, if it's going to be better for the Nigerian people, then I guess it's fine.
Well, if he wants to rejig his team, I guess it's a plus. It's a plus to the country and to his administration. Why? We need youths with the capacity to perform. These are men that are tired, old men that are tired. Someone like Audu Agbe should take a rest for now.
Normally, the ministers and everybody that has worked with him have actually had a long time to work, which has not often been the case. You have opportunity to review your cabinet at least every 2 years, but what we've seen for the past 4 years is that these people have worked all along, and I don't think it's a bad idea if he thinks about reshuffling his cabinet.
I feel it's his choice. I don't think it's a big issue. I mean, if it's something that's good to make his second term better, I feel it's something that he should go for, really.
A group of youths who spoke with Plus TV Africa appealed to the president to populate his fresh cabinet with resourceful young people.
Well, I think it should be Nigeria first and nothing partisan. Okay, personally, I look forward to the time that Nigeria will look at people that can really drive the nation, not minding whether they belong to your party or not. And instead of restricting the ministerial appointments to just parties, we have other young guys that can really deliver. Okay, someone like Showore, Kisli Mogalo, all those other young guys.
Other Nigerians insisted that ministerial appointment mustn't be a settlement platform for recycled politicians.
The 3 ministerial appointment Fashola is holding, I think it's too much for him.
Regarding Amechi and Fashola, I think it's one thing having people that they've been in politics and giving them appointments. But so far, the appointments in Nigeria, the way I see them is like settlements for a job well done.
Mary Chinda for Plus TV Africa.
And now you heard that last gentleman saying that the appointments are somewhat of a settlement for a job well done. What do you make of that?
Before we went on break now, I actually said it. We are still going back to what I said. Let me tell you, we know of a popular man in the Southwest. I don't want to mention his name. We know how he deployed all his political machineries for the 2015 election and still ongoing. See, people like that cannot recommend. Even after 2015 election, we all overheard what happened between internal crisis within the party APC in court. We saw a part trying to override another part's interest. So the issue of somebody trying to settle another person still comes to play. The person I mentioned, I don't want to mention that person's name in Southwest. Today, if that person nominates at least 5 or 10 ministers, I doubt it if any one of them is not going to be considered. So we are still going back to the issue of Kaba, and Kaba.
But that's the nature of politics is some people say it should not be a zero-sum game, but in many ways it is, because people put their life on the line, their resources on the line to support. And so the nature of the game is that once you win, you distribute to the well-being of every person who is supported. And so in some ways, the challenge therefore is, how do you now find in that mix the most competent? So that's the challenge for the president. I don't have a problem if he settles a person who worked for the campaign, but the person should be competent to deliver on the job. Make sure you screen and be sure that they can deliver, else the country suffers.
Talking about screening and the country suffers, now we have no less than 8 politicians. These were people who were appointed by the president, either serving or not serving currently, and with about 232 billion naira corruption cases. Actually works for the president's re-election. Now, if we are saying that the president is electing people with integrity, and he elected the likes of Babachir Lawal, and we know how that story went in this question of who is the presidency, and a whole lot more of other developments, how then we still see this cases pending? We wouldn't want to go further mentioning names, but we see some corruption cases pending, and the president says, well, I am picking people with integrity. Is he not countering himself?
Or having double standards?
Saying one thing and acting another?
Yeah, you see, again, much of the decisions, you'll be even surprised to know that the president may even be clueless. In fact, there's a material, if people who do management study, called Reframing Organizations, written by a guy called Bowman and Deal. And there's a concept that they advance in that material about leadership and the concept of cluelessness. That within certain organizational patterns or frames, some leaders become clueless because of the way the system works. You'll be amazed that the president really doesn't know some of the nitty-gritties that go on with the people that work with him.
So with their pending corruption cases, the president has no idea?
He may be absolute, and because of that kind of position, sometimes information
if the president
can be
is not aware, then what lies the judiciary to
exactly.
push these
So
cases
how
forward?
do we fight the corruption
so it's the
that he wants
political
to
will
fight?
to make sure these things are done. Particularly also during an election season, parties usually and leadership usually overlooks a lot of things to find the critical support, particularly when the persons involved. Take for instance a Ganduje in Kano. That's the sitting governor of Kano. You want the vote. Kano has consistently produced some of the highest numbers, of votes. So, if Ganduje is a popular person in Kano, you don't want to, no matter the corruption case Ganduje has, you would want to sort of play soft on that to make sure you do not lose. Because if you lose Kano, then that begins to tell you the direction in which that election will go. So in politics, yes, all needs to be fair, but again, a lot is unfair because
what about his
you have to be
appointment
able
of
to
women in his cabinet as well? We've not seen two strong numbers.
I think it's just the head of service that is a woman.
Well, we had the Minister of Finance as a woman.
Until she left.
Oftentimes we advocate for women. We try to follow what the UN talked about. We're getting 35% of women into our cabinet. But it boils down to the issue of the integrity, like he mentioned, like you mentioned too. Well, I believe this regime, the second term of the president, we should try and give room for these women. Women are compassionate. I'm telling you. Women know what needs to be done at a particular point.
You sound like you're all for women's rights.
I'm telling you. See, I kind of followed up with U.S. election in 2016, and I must tell you, I am a strong advocate for Hillary Clinton. Not because of anything. If you follow up the political career from being a lawyer up to being the Secretary of State and the whole like that, that tells you more what the women can do for this country.
Okay.
And of course, even when our economy was the largest in the Africa, we know who was the Minister of Finance.
Well, we need to go. We want to thank you so much, gentlemen, for this conversation. I wish you could have more of it, especially about women. I'm hoping that there will be a coalition of sorts, like you mentioned earlier. But we want to thank you very much, Reginald Bassi, Public Affairs Analyst, and Tony Folorunso, Public Affairs Commentator. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, more on Nigeria Decides.
Don't go anywhere.